everyone for joining us on Wednesday evening at 7 p.m. It's such a moment of delight when I find our regular viewers, who keep on coming back to our shows. And I am Neeta Aneja, and I'm the founder of Trends, which is the platform for art, cultural, social, and literary experiences. And today we have our 47th author interaction, and the author interaction series was started in pandemic last year, and we've been going from strength to strength. I request you all to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Trends Events, where you will even find the recording of our conversation today in a few days' time. And we have had authors who've been totally inspirational and path-breaking. And we are really looking forward to a wonderful conversation today. Today, I really thank Rotary Cosmopolitan for collaborating with us. And we are going to do many more author interactions with them. This is first in the collaborative series. So we'll have a lot of Rotary people also joining in today. And I really want to thank Shweta, Westland, who's really helped us and who's really been kind enough to connect us with Mr. Peter Mukerjea. As we all know, he's the former CEO of Star India Network and easily one of the most successful television professional in the history of TV industry. In fact, Mr. Peter Mukerjea has written this book, which is a wonderful memoir, Starstruck Confessions of a TV Journalist. From battling rival CEOs to winning over presidents, from making multi-dollar deals in the back of a Mumbai taxi to audaciously bringing the biggest film star in the world as your TV host and making him even bigger. This book that we are going to discuss today chronicles the unbelievable story of how a crack team turned Star TV from a quirky challenger channel to the shining jewel in the crown of Robert Murdoch. So welcome, Peter. Many thanks to you for coming to our platform.
Thank you, Neeta. Thank you very much. Firstly, for those very kind words, too generous, I would say, because I think, with all these things, one's going to be just very fortunate to be in a position where I am, where I'm lucky to be here. And, I look forward to having this conversation with you and all your other participants.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And before I dive into the conversation straight away, as I've been telling you all, Mr. Peter Mukerjea is the former dynamic CEO of Star TV Network, who transformed a loss-making Star TV into a billion-dollar network. Peter, you completed your education from Doon School, then Watford, UK, and you started your career with Heinz, and then you've worked with multiple companies all across. So do you think this really helped you in getting the business acumen that you naturally possessed in managing Star Network and changing its fortunes?
Yes, it's I think a very perceptive question, if I may say that, because I think one of the unique things that I believe I possessed, didn't think about it at the time, but perhaps later on, was that I think the fact that I was able to spend a large number of years and, by that time, majority of my life living overseas, I was kind of used to a certain way of working, a certain kind of work culture, and a certain kind of way of interacting with people. Now, whether all of those things put together combine to become, business acumen, I think maybe a bit far-fetched, but I think it kind of helps in some way. It's not entirely that, of course, but it helps in terms of how you can, understand consumer behavior in a more kind of deeper way. You're able to kind of enjoy the benefits of having, a really good team of people working with you. Very often, people have great people working with them, but they're not able to extract the best out of them for whatever reason. It could be, work culture, it could be personal chemistry, et cetera, et cetera. But I think, some of these factors that had part of my life before I joined, the television company, I think it certainly helped me, and I think it helped the company in many ways to, to address issues in the marketplace which were, perhaps not being able to be addressed by other people.
So very right. your book has really your pearls of wisdom in doing businesses, and definitely would really appeal to anyone who's interested to know about the growth of different famous business enterprises. In fact, those who want to even run a business or start from scratch. So, a little more about your book to the viewers today. Not, please do not give any spoilers. I would like them to read the book, and definitely,
Yeah.
yes.
Well, I started writing this book, way back. I think if I remember correctly, somewhere in the late 2000s, then maybe 2000. And I went through did all the heavy lifting at that point. And then I kind of aborted the plan. It sort of went by the wayside. I had, a couple of publishers who were very interested in publishing that book. I wasn't sure whether it was the right time. A number of sort of doubts were still hovering around in my head. So, but when I, later on when I completed it, which was about, a year and a half ago, I think it allowed me then to be a little bit more circumspect about what I was writing about. And in many ways, obviously in that time, the whole media industry kind of moved along and has moved along, big time, rapidly. And so in that process, you could either look at it and say, hey, this is all 20 years ago stuff. Who was interested in what happened then? But actually what is happening today is really a reflection in many ways of how it all began and how it's kind of evolved over a period of time. So then when I saw it in that context, it made sense, and it made sense to the publishers. And a lot of the people who read the book have phoned me and called me, and people who know me, etc., have said, look, it's fantastic. It's really conversational. It's very easygoing. We sort of read through it over a long weekend and, found it really enjoyable and blah, blah, blah. And very kind words. But I think what I tried to do was not to make it a book which was full of, research in a real market research sense. It's not full of data. It's got a few numbers in it, but not too many. Most of the numbers are on the pages, it tells you which page is which page. But apart from that, it's all pretty straightforward. It's all anecdotal as far as I can remember. It's all entirely true. There's no fiction in it. A lot of people tend to take a little bit of license with writing this kind of stuff. It's very hard to necessarily, evaluate otherwise. But it is completely and utterly what happened. And all the people that are part of that book, in many ways, have kind of said, listen, it's been fantastic. It's a great walk down memory lane. We've kind of forgotten how, Channel V arrived in the marketplace and how MTV disappeared and how did, Star News arrive and what happened with your relationship with NDTV and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think these things just kind of disappear into the haze of time, and into the kind of clouds of dust that appear when you kind of move along. And now that they are in a book, I think, they have reference material possibilities. I'm not being pompous when I say that, but I think, it has reference material possibilities from a business point of view, because it kind of allows somebody who's, perhaps going to be a student of media or is a student of media or a business executive, to look at some of the things that happened in that book, some of the things that have been talked about, whether it's to do with, how we kind of got around competitive forces, how we kind of managed people. People were such an important part of our entire kind of trajectory of growth. And without them, none of this would have been possible. I think, that is absolutely probably top of the pile as far as I'm concerned. And I was very fortunate that I was able to, have enough memory to write it down many years after the time.
So right. And this has also been, when I read the book and I've been wondering each and every detail, as you just mentioned, it's all 100% true. And you've really written out of memory and each and everything, imagining the fact that you were with Star from 1997 to 2007, each and everything that you've quoted, you've written, I mean, it's all shows you've got a very, very good memory. And I would like to show everyone the book. It is a wonderful cover and you must all read it.
Thank you, Neeta. Thank you for showing the book. It's wonderful. I've got one here, so you can have a look at that too.
So we can do this. This is a great photo opportunity. Yes.
You get 3 mugshots of me on the same screen.
So, what was driving you at the moment of time in 90s to do this impossible task of transforming Star TV into a billion-dollar network? I would say from the book that I read, and I didn't know about it earlier, that you were actually on fire. You were awarded the CEO of the year multiple times, and you were on the India's power list for 4 consecutive years. So, what was this driving force? What was really driving Peter Mukerjea into such a success story?
Well, first of all, let me say this, and being completely candid about it, I had no idea that it was going to be a success story, the way it turned out. We didn't consider the success factor, at the time. Really, what we wanted to do was have a lot of fun. We wanted to kind of enjoy ourselves on that journey, and really to see whether, what the end result was going to be. Because we thought to ourselves that, look, whatever's going on around us can't be brain surgery. I mean, it's not difficult, so what is it that, makes somebody number one, and what makes somebody number 3 in a 3-person race? And when we kind of sat down and did some very basic kind of soul searching on that, it appeared that, look, I think, between us in the room, Samir Nair, Tarun, Deepak Sehgal, Sumo, Raj Naik, a whole bunch of people like that, to kind of think and say to ourselves that, listen, we can do this. This isn't going to be difficult, but, we needed to kind of just get our heads together and be, literally singing off the same page, right? And what drove me was the fact that, I was able to get my kind of point of view across to all of my colleagues, not all the time, some of the time. Very often we didn't have, an agreement on points of view, and we had disagreements, which actually makes the entire process that much more fun. As I say, if you have 2 people keep agreeing with each other all the time, then one of them is unnecessary. So, we had lots of disagreements. And I think in that entire process, certainly our first mission was accomplished, which was to have a lot of fun. So we had a great time. We worked hard. We played even harder. And, we didn't know, we didn't really care what the end result was going to be. We just knew that we'll see. Let's see what comes out of this. If we don't like what we're doing, we can go off and work in a bank. We can go work somewhere else, which is a 9-to-5 kind of job, right? But for us, it wasn't a job. So we come to work thinking, right, this is going to be a fun day. Let's see what new is going to happen today, right? And every day there was something new. And, all the people we hired were of a similar kind of mindset, similar kind of level of passion. So that we were all literally, we were almost at a point where I could start a sentence and a colleague of mine could finish it.
Fantastic.
So, I think some of those things have been injected into the book. And
Yes.
and certainly from a reader point of view, there's lots of stuff which is in between the lines. You've got to read it to really find the nuance of it, because some of these things you don't really want to talk about boring details, right? Leave people's imagination to kind of sort that out. And when we did that, or when I did that and writing it all up, there were a number of times when the editor said, listen, I don't really understand this. Can you explain this? And I had to go back to them and say, look, maybe you want to read it again. And maybe you read it a 3rd time to really see if you can still not understand it. And more often than not, they came back to me and said, yeah, we see what you're saying. We get it.
Coming back to that, in fact, this has been really very important for you. I read in the book that you wanted to become the employer of choice with the right compensation, the right conditions, the right quality of people. I think that drove your team the way you just mentioned. For you, the workplace atmosphere and ethos was significant parameters, and you spared no expenses, as you said, that you could get the employers to deliver the great results if one compensated them more than they expected. So would you do this man management or the team management differently if given a chance now, or you would continue the way it was maybe so many years?
No, I do it differently. I would do it certainly do it slightly differently. Not very much, but a little bit. I think, those times are different. We were able to kind of do certain things then, which may or may not be able possible to do today because, competition's woken up. So we'd have to kind of do it in a kind of more, in a slightly more kind of thought through manner. We were a little sort of Johnny English in our thinking, in the sense, we knew no fear, we knew nothing. So we went forward almost blind. Whereas now I think you cannot necessarily afford to do that. You have to kind of look around you to see what else is going on and who could possibly be doing the same thing, so that you need to stand apart. But one of the, not just one, but I think some of the things that certainly lend themselves to continuing to be the same as we were then is my philosophy and our philosophy of hiring people that made the organization one of giants rather than of dwarfs, right? So you hire people that you allow to flourish, rather than kind of have them there just to do something and not have a point of view. And it was very important that in the kind of organization that we ran, that we needed to give people an opportunity to be able to speak their mind, in a meeting room or privately, or standing by a water cooler, or standing in a car park having a smoke, or whatever it was, or in a bar in the evening having a drink. Anytime you speak your mind, and you will never be penalized for it. You would, more often than not, you'd kind of have something to show for it at the end of it. And I think that's something that I still think, and I know so many people who used to be colleagues of mine who are now running companies in India and other parts of the world. And many of them, whenever we do get a chance to catch up, we talk about this, and they thankfully are following similar practices, and that many ways, many companies don't do that. They're still very autocratic. They're still very bureaucratic in their way of, running a business and managing people. And I think this is all about managing people, and I remember listening to Larry Summers once. Yeah, so I heard Larry Summers give a talk, and he said in that changing people is better than changing people.
Yes.
Right. So if you think about that, it can confuse me to begin with, and it sometimes still confuses me. What exactly was he saying? And after his speech, there was a coffee break or something, and I remember going up to see him. He was surrounded by a bunch of people. I managed to get my 2 minutes of time with him, and I said, "Look, so Larry, can you just tell me a little more about changing people is better than changing people?" He said, "Well, that's the whole point. Think about it, and think about it, with an open mind. So, can you change people that, do you change them by getting rid of them, or do you change them by simply changing their way of working and their thinking?" So some people say, you can't change, a leopard can never change its spots, right? And that's fine. But I think, in a business environment, I think you can kind of have the best of both worlds. You don't have to be stuck with one doctrine.
So right. In fact, in your book, I find it very interesting that you begin coming to your quote, which you just mentioned, changing people is better than changing people. In fact, I find it very interesting that you begin most of your rather all of your chapters with a quote. So this is unusual, and some of the quotes are indeed very, very, documented and worth implementing. So, like you mentioned that when you're a catalyst for change, you make enemies, and I'm the proud one who made some. Winners have parties and losers have meetings. Changing people is better than changing people. So how did these quotes come about? So did you write them before writing the chapter? How was it?
Well, both. Some of them I wrote because they were in my head, and they were kind of embedded in my head and set in stone, I would say. And I very much wanted those to kind of come out, because it became part of my persona. It became part of my kind of the way I live my life. And so, I needed to put that out there. And so when I put that out there, then sometimes the sort of the kind of, the words that followed funneled into that. And there were other times when I wrote a chapter, for example, the chapter on, the music business and MTV and Channel V and so on. And I really wasn't, there was some really, really interesting quotes that I kind of considered. And then one of them was, from a ex-colleague of mine who's passed away now, Sophia Haq. And some of the words that she said. So, I think it worked both ways, Neeta. There were some quotes that just had to be there, and then you kind of filled in the gaps. And there were some that you wrote everything out and then tried to find an appropriate quote for it,
But I think most of the quotes that you've mentioned at the beginning of the chapter, they are basically the essence of the chapter, if you really look through it.
Yes.
And that is what I could relate when I was reading the chapters.
Absolutely. Very much.
Last few questions for me, because we have a beautiful round of interactive, a lot of people, a lot of professionals are waiting to interact with you, and I don't want to keep waiting. And last two questions rather from me. I have a couple of them. Maybe I'll come back again, time permitting. So
sure.
How do you look back when you realize that how you headed the transformation of Star TV? From the fact that you were running the episodes of Bold and Beautiful, Baywatch, to Kyunki Saas Bhi Kabhi Bahu Thi. So how was that transformation taking place? So you as the CEO of the company, I mean, I'm sure it was a very tough decision to kind of mix them up, or was it playing to the gallery?
Now, well, listen,
it was,
I was very fortunate. I cannot tell you how fortunate I was that I was not responsible personally for, programming, which I think is one of the hardest things to get right and one of the easiest things to get wrong. So I knew what programs I like to watch, but being in the television business, you're kind of busy from morning till night and more, and you really would get very little time to sit and watch, TV as a regular consumer does. So we would watch stuff, but it would be very, very sporadic. You'd watch a few minutes of this and a few minutes of that. Sometimes you get sucked into it and sometimes you don't. But one of the things became very clear to us early on was that, look, being a national service in English was not going to be something that was going to be, getting us anywhere. Okay. We would always remain at the bottom of the pile. And our competitors, Z, Sony, and so on, were going to be far ahead of us because they were in a language that the bulk of the people who were viewing television were watching. So we needed to change that. And therefore, I thank my predecessor, Ratikant Basu, immensely, because he's actually the guy who started the ball rolling. I happened to come in later on and get a lot of the credit, but in many ways, he was the one who actually got the ball rolling. And at that point, experimentation was the name of the game. So, we tried doing Baywatch in Hindi. We did Bold and the Beautiful in Hindi. And, yes, of course, and we were kind of ridiculed by everybody because, the people that watched in English found it abhorrent. People who watched Hindi couldn't figure out what the hell was going on because it just was too alien from every point of view. And so, it was a matter of great conjecture, great laugh. It was a sort of social conversation saying, oh, look what these guys are doing. They don't know their backside from their elbow. And, it's all kind of a big hodgepodge. The fact is, we had to go through that evolutionary process because we were turning ourselves from a particular kind of, DNA gene to a different DNA gene, right? Yes. And we were an English DNA, program producer and a broadcaster we weren't starting from ground zero and saying like Z did as being a Hindi service. So everybody knew Star as an English language service. So we needed to go full circle and come back in with an English, with a Hindi, rendition. So couldn't do that just like that. So we had to, and we didn't want to change the name because there was far too much investment gone into Star Plus as, as a brand, and Star as a brand. So we didn't want to change that. There were lots of possibilities, lots of options we considered, but we discarded those. So I think the time when we moved from, Bold and Beautiful, Santa Barbara, Baywatch, some lovely programs, Wonder Years, etc., to, Saas Bhi Kabhi Bahu Thi and Tutu Meme and, all of these things. Of course, there was a kind of huge outcry. A lot of people who kind of were in love with Star because it was in English found the whole thing, again, really weird. We kind of changed overnight to become a Hindi show, a Hindi broadcaster. But we had to do it. So the big learning for us was that, some of these things, you have to go through the hoops before you get out of the tunnel.
Totally. And I can't resist asking you about KBL to KBC. I mean, in fact, that gamble of yours really, really paid off. And I think that made Amitabh Bachchan even into a bigger star that he was before you met him in his house and kind of fixed his remuneration to 3 times what he was supposed to get. And earlier, I remember it was, you decided about Kaun Banega Lakpati to now Kaun Banega Crorepati. So you have to tell the viewers and the audience right now about this iconic decision of yours, which I think still going on 20 years down the line, you still have Kaun Banega Crorepati. And I think that must have been the biggest revenue generator for you.
Yeah, well, again, I think people that know me, and hopefully some of your participants who know me by now a little bit, will know that modesty is not my middle name, right? Although I like to be, like to consider that to be so, it's not my middle name. But I've got to tell you that I was incredibly fortunate that we had all the right ingredients in the room at that time when this decision took place. So first of all, there was Rupert Murdoch, who was there, who was the key ingredient, I would say, in making this change between Kaun Banega Lakpati to Kaun Banega Crorepati. It couldn't have happened with anybody else, or that decision could not have been taken by anybody else at that time. The numbers were too big in terms of changing from one, numerical to another. But for him, it was a matter that, decision that he took in a split second. So he simply thumped the table and he said, look, that's no prize. That is no prize money. There has to be something bigger than that. And if there was a Hindi number for $1 million, then we would have gone for $1 million worth of prize money. As it turned out, there wasn't a Hindi number for $1 million, or if there was, it wasn't something that that was kind of colloquially used enough. And so we settled for Crorepati, right? And that decision literally, I think, changed not just our fortunes, but it changed in many ways the fortunes of the TV industry, because it allowed a lot more investment to come into television that was not there earlier. Everyone was looking to do things on the cheap. So if you give somebody a budget, you'd give them a budget which was really tight. And so they would have to cut corners, whether it was on lighting or sound or quality of the talent, etc. Whereas in this particular case, we gave the production company a budget which was higher and considerably higher than something they ever used before, or they've ever had the kind of feel for before. And so much so that they actually came back to us and said, hey, guess what? We've been able to put this thing together for a lot less than you gave us. And our reaction, in fact, Samir's reaction and our collective reaction was, no, we want you to spend that entire amount. So don't come back and say you've saved you 5 lakhs. We want you to come back and say, listen, we've done it in that amount. And invest that money in getting the lighting right, in getting the sound right, in getting the set looking right, in getting, Amitabh Bachchan's costumes looking good, and all of those things. Let's invest that money properly. And that, without knowing it, we actually managed to change how other broadcasters and other production companies started to view their business. So people then slowly stopped cutting corners, and they started investing in the talent. They started investing in making sure that they had proper costumes into the show, proper makeup, proper everything. So it was done to a certain standard. And I think that was very important. That's really what we were able to kind of accomplish unwittingly. We didn't know that at the time, but as it turned out, when you think about it and look back, you realize what changes happened as a result of that decision.
Absolutely right. And it has been, I would say again, that such an iconic decision. And 20 years down the line, and Amitabh Bachchan still there uh, hosting the show. I think it is great. And we have something to look forward to always. And that should come.
Yeah, and that show is still there. And it's still as interesting as it was,
Yes.
then. I mean, they've had a few modifications and so on, but, it's still a great show to watch.
Yes, definitely. I'm sure everyone here will agree, and everyone who watches this recording later will agree to that. I had a question about Pranay Roy also, and because that 9 o'clock news of yours really made a lot of news. I'll come back to that, and I'll like to move on to my interactive round, and I'll begin with Rajiv Batra. He's a technology professional with nearly 30 years of experience in India and US. He has had strategic and leadership positions in organizations like Airtel, Reliance, MTS Russia, and right now he's the group CIO, Chief Information Technology Officer for Times Group. Hello, Rajiv.
Hi, Neeta.
Hi, Rajiv.
Hi, Peter. It's nice to interact with you. Indeed.
Likewise.
And it's a privilege to hear your candid views and experiences. It's been quite enlightening, I would say.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, coming to my question, like you have been a thought leader and have provided leadership in a lot of adversities also. Any learning you may like to share that may guide the thought leaders of tomorrow?
Wow, it's a tough one, huh? I mean, I wish I was forewarned with this. I could have kind of been a bit creative. But look, firstly, you called me a thought leader. I'm very kind of privileged for you to be saying that to me. I don't think so. I tend to kind of follow my intuition more than anything else. And if it works for anyone else, then that's their good fortune, I suppose.
You are being modest, I would say.
Well, as I said, no, it's not about modesty. Quite honestly, I think it's. I don't know how other people operate, but for me, it's it is gut feel and kind of moderation in that is very often the way to kind of proceed and progress, and there isn't, in the kind of industry that we're all in, including yourself, there is we're at the forefront of change, and very often you don't have research to go on all of the time, right? Because it's not just happening in this country, it's happening everywhere else. So you can't really rely on sort of international research to kind of fuel your thinking or fuel your point of view. Whereas, so you have to go by, I think, literally by gut feel, having kind of got a sense of it. But I think in answer to your question, look, quite honestly, the thought has to be from just within yourself. It is, there is no alternative to that. Yes, I think surround yourself by really good people that you trust, and people who have the same level of passion, and then let them, flourish. I think that's a key element of whatever I was able to do or not able to do was linked to that. And if it wasn't for the people that surrounded me, then I think it would have been impossible.
Thank you, Rajiv.
Thank you.
We have Mr. Deepak Khote. He's a career banker who's worked for 2 decades with 3 international banks across the globe. He currently works as a consultant in financial markets and lives in London, and he's joining us from London. Hi, Deepak.
Hi, Neeta. Hi, Peter. Neeta, thanks for the opportunity, Neeta, for me to ask a question. I think, Peter, I want to start by saying that back in the 80s, 90s, one had to have a second name of Gandhi to set up a Maruti kind of an organization to unseat Fiat and ambassador. So I think it's very impressive in hindsight how Rupert and you kind of, went through all the hurdles like government approvals, cable lobby to unseat Doordarshan. Obviously, that was not the aim, but still, I think as a student, then I personally, I felt that it was a paradigm shift in satellite television and a welcome change, as you wake up to a 24/7 television. So decades later, I think I've got this opportunity to thank you personally for bringing in that revolution in India. So thank you very much for that. I'm not here to make any political comment, statement or question, but I've been working in investment banking for a number of decades, and Rupert Murdoch and his empire has always been a subject of great interest and discussions, both formal as well as informal. Now, Rupert has had a very big influence in British politics and media for decades, and it's shaped the outcome of elections, even in the developed world. Today, we are in a very different, or should I say exponentially different time, when global news media, and in particular in India, there has been a lot of menace of fake news, pro-establishment news, propaganda peddlers who are engaged in TRP scams. So they are more entertainment channel than factual news. So in a nutshell, I believe that there is a strong credibility crisis in Indian media today that needs a crackdown or a regulation. But that view is also contrary to democratic norms of a free and independent media. So I haven't read your book, but the two questions I have for you, if I may, I would love to have your take on whether news media needs a stricter regulation today and how it can be achieved. And my second question is, Star TV was Hong Kong based. And in my view, that was a way for Rupert to enter into China. Why then was the main focus, along with you, both suddenly physically shifted to India? Was it a case of China snubbing Rupert Murdoch, or was it a case of, chalo, India, hey, we can get anything done?
Well, it certainly wasn't, chalo, India, you can get anything done. It certainly wasn't that. It was partly to do with the fact that, China was a very difficult market for News Corp to kind of break into and continue to survive in that marketplace. Also, I think what happened was we in India were fortunate at that time. As I say, we were fortunate because of the company, that, the sort of penetration of television was still very low, number one. Number two, the quality of content that was being provided to these viewers in India was also of a relatively low kind of, production values. So when satellite television arrived, Z kind of was the main thrust of that. And the quality of the content that they were producing was streets ahead of what was available on the terrestrial service. Now, my belief, and I've talked a little bit about this in the book, is, if you pay peanuts, you get monkeys, right? And in a sense, that's not just about compensation in terms of salaries. It also reflects, the same thing is reflected in the quality of content that gets produced. So when at that time, Doordarshan was paying producers a certain amount of money for, a program, it was done in the most convoluted and the most complicated manner you could possibly imagine. So what was happening, just to give you a little insight, I'm sure you will know this, but perhaps with some of the younger people that are watching this conversation may not kind of be able to kind of put a finger on it. At that particular point in time, DD was simply auctioning all their slots. So if you had a 7:30 p.m. slot, you'd auction that slot per se. And if I was a producer, I'd, bid for it and I'd win that slot. And then I'd produce a program at my cost and put it into that half-an-hour slot. Then I would go out and sell advertising to recover my production cost. And really, it was all about, how do I break even? Number one. Number two, how do I make a buck out of it, right? And it was nothing to do with the quality. It was, if there was no other broadcast opportunities right now, the conversation that you and I are having would get 100 ratings, right? Because everybody will be watching this. They've got nothing else to watch. Okay, so at that particular point of time, Doordarshan was the only thing you could watch. So there was no competition for them. And so when competition did arrive in the form of Z, it was it was a superlative change. I mean, it just wiped away everything else. And then when Star arrived subsequently, it was an even, more pronounced change, but, slightly more refined, if you like, because it wasn't going from 0 to 100, it was going from 100 to 120. And so therefore, what the viewer was getting was, a massive improvement in their viewing experience. And that's really what, quite honestly, putting it in a very simplistic sort of way, that's exactly what happened. And along with audiences comes revenue. So if your focus has to be, so look, I've got to provide a program that is going to make Mr. and Mrs. whoever, Patel, Shah, Mukerjea, etc., sitting at home, watching television, feel nice and warm and fuzzy with what they're watching. And if they're nice and happy and content with that, then that's all you need to do. Everything else will follow. Versus trying to do something which said, listen, I've spent $100, I've got to make 110. Let's see how I can do that, right? So you have a different mindset when you're looking at something in a way which say, look, I'm spending 100, I've got to make 110, otherwise I can't survive, right? And one of the fortunate things about News Corp and Rupert was that he was, I call him one of the world's most kind of daring gamblers. So he would gamble and say, look, I don't really, okay, I'm going to invest this. I think it's going to work. Let me put my money and see how long it takes to recover. So for somebody like Star, it was 10 years before we made a dime.
Right.
And even today, I don't think there's any investors in the media business or many other businesses who would be prepared to continue to invest money for 10 years and then see a profit. So there's a big, there's a mega shift in thinking.
No, I think quite a bold move. I think the first question I had was your take on whether news media needs stricter regulation and how it can be achieved. That was the first.
Yeah, well, let me answer that. I'm sorry I missed that. I'd made a note of it, but I skipped past it. I think more than it needs regulation, I think what news media needs is people who have good training. I don't think there's adequate training going on for the people that enter the news business, because you can judge that instantly by the quality of questions that come from the journalist who, comes across somebody that they want to kind of interview. And, they have not done their homework. Their level of homework quality is so poor, pathetic, that, they have nothing to ask. They stick a mic in front of you and say, any comment, right? Now, that's no way of doing things. If you look at any of the real, high quality channels around the world, even, whether it's the BBC, CNN, Al Jazeera, you name it, France 24, whatever. They all have highly credible people out there doing their, coverage and broadcast. I'm sorry to say that in our country, we don't have that. I think that is a lack of training, and they're not being invested in, and really that needs to improve. Once that happens, you'll see the quality of content changing immediately. It's not about regulation. You can make regulation, as much as you want. It will, the quality of people will determine whether that regulation can stick or not. Otherwise, people will get around regulation.
Right. No, thanks a lot, Peter. Thanks, Neeta.
Thank you.
Thanks, Raji.
Little bit of data that India ranks 142 out of 180 countries in a list of freedom of press. Yeah, just an extension of that question. Now we have Mr. Madhur Aneja. He's been the managing director of various multinational companies all across the globe. Federal Mughal, US, Vibroacoustic, Germany, and now he's the CEO of Sage Companies, which has its manufacturing facility in India and US. And he's also the president of Rotary Cosmopolitan, which has really been a big support to our forum. Yes, Madhur.
Yeah, thanks, Neeta. Thanks for that introduction. Peter, I'm glad to be talking to the real star behind the star. So it's really a pleasure. We all know about the journey that you have had, and we know the success what Star has had in India over the years. And you talked a little bit about the ingredients, if I may say, which went into create that success. So my question to you is, when you started off at Star, Is that what you had envisaged, or did you have bigger plans? And specific question, if is there one thing which you wanted to accomplish even further and you were not able to do, which given a chance you would like to do now?
Yeah, very much. Look, when I joined, thank you, Raj, thank you, Madhu, for that. I think quite a tricky question. Let me see if I can come through that crystal maze, as it were. But when I joined the company, it was more to do with personal requirement. Okay, and I'll be candid with you. I was living in Hong Kong at the time. I very much wanted to come back and work in India. I'd had one shot at it earlier. It didn't quite work. It was fun, but it didn't completely kind of fulfill my requirements. So I kind of went off and lived in Hong Kong, which I was fortunate to do at the time because I was a UK citizen and I could live in Hong Kong for, within the kind of regulatory environment. It was not a problem for me. So but I very much wanted to come back and work in India because I could see immense opportunity in the marketplace, and I still do. As a matter of fact, I think there's still tremendous opportunity, but many of it is not yet fully utilized. So my requirement to come back to India was really to do with that, and Star was a great opportunity for me to do that because it was at that time front-ending media. There was not so much technology involved as it is today. It was more to do with media, more to do with reach, more to do with broadcast. And there was a big gaping hole in the marketplace. So what the viewer was getting was far from what was available elsewhere. And so how does one fill that gap and do so profitably? I guess it's a fundamental of a marketing person's kind of thinking, right? So you find a gap in the market, fill it, and in the process make some money. That's really what marketing is perhaps about. So for me, that was staring me in the face. So television content at that time was quite dull, had to get changed, did get changed. Star brought in a lot of that, Z brought in a lot of that, Sony brought some of that, all of that changed. And in the process, everybody started to make some, make a profit out of that. Your second point, could you just give me that one again?
So the question there was that if there was one thing which you could not accomplish, what was that?
Yeah, Madhu, what I did not manage to accomplish, and partly my fault, was that I wasn't able to take Star into the public domain as a company. I couldn't get it listed. I really wanted to get Star India listed on the Indian stock market and have, Indian investors, retail investors invest in it for two reasons. One is it would then become a completely Indian company. It would not be seen as, a US company, which is kind of leveraging the Indian audience and simply kind of gouging money out of the marketplace, right? And at the same time, it would give all of those people that worked in the business an opportunity to kind of, extract some value for themselves over a period of time by building a really sustainable business. I wasn't able to do that, and that was my biggest regret.
Great, thank you so much. I really appreciate your candid answer there. Thank you.
Thank you, Madhu.
Now we have Mr. Dia Aneja. He's the MD of Aneja Bright Steels Private Limited, who are manufacturing cold-run wires. And he's a big philanthropist and he's a prominent Rotarian.
Hi.
Hi, Ajay.
Hi.
Hi, Neeta. Thank you for, hi, Peter Mukerjea. How are you?
Very good, thank you. Thanks for calling me that.
Thank you, Neeta, for giving me the opportunity to have an interaction with the star behind the star.
Yes.
Behind the Star TV. Though I'm going to I was just listening to you, and you have written the book with your all memories behind, which you are carrying with you, carry on with the memories. But still, I was having one question. What were the challenges you have faced while writing the book? And could you easily recollect all the incidents and give them, string them together easily? Though it's a difficult question, but
yeah, very difficult question. I'll tell you the sort of hurdles I faced, one was actually recollecting everything in some form of knitted together form. I could remember various little incidents. I could remember various moments, but to kind of put them in a sequence of a narrative was actually very, very hard. And it took me a long time, which is why it took me so long to actually get it completed, because I got frustrated in the middle of it all and I stopped. And then I got back onto it, some years later when I gave some more thought to it, and it kind of crystallized a little bit more. And I would see this thing lying on my table and I would say, come on, you got to finish this. This is, you got to do it. You got to do it. You can't let this thing, you cannot just walk away. You got to write it, get it out there. I then showed it to a couple of friends of mine in that raw form. And they said to me, look, you have to. And they were not in the same business as television or media. Somebody was a banker, somebody was, working in the infrastructure business, etc. And they said, look, you have to do this. This is something that nobody knows. And it would be of great interest to a lot of people who are, who are not part of that whole world of media and entertainment and media and content, etc. So that kind of motivated me, because it came from people who I had respect for and people who then had, a level of interest in something which I thought nobody would be interested in, right? So when those kind of two things came together, it made me feel, well, let me see, I'll have another go at it. And then I had a go at it. And then, I reached another frustrating point. When I wrote it and I sent it to the publishers, who, bless them, were fantastic. The editor was terrific. Deepti was, must have spent hours tearing her hair out, trying to figure out what I've written and how to connect the dots, because they were jumping about. And it's in a very conversational style of writing, and intentionally so. So what happened there was that, you and I are having conversation, we talk about something, and then you have a thought and you jump onto something, right? And I have a thought, I jump onto something. Now to put that into a book form is quite hard. So for the editor to then, pull that in and then connect it to something that happened, 30 pages earlier is actually quite hard. So I take my hat off to them, and I think they've been fantastic about it. So those were some of the challenges. I've got to tell you, I think it wasn't an easy thing to do, but also putting it into that conversational style, just like you and I are talking. So if you read the book, it's a bit like that. So you and I are talking, and it's, it's in that kind of format. It's also quite difficult to do when you think about doing it like that. If it happens naturally, that's great. But if it doesn't, then it's really quite hard to kind of make it happen.
But you have done it. You have done it.
I've done it. I'm really happy it's happened, actually. At least I've got something to give my grandkids.
It's really something very good that you have lined up all the things in a very proper manner. It's really very interesting to read.
Ajay, you must read the book. It's fantastic.
Yes. Yeah, that's
you
true.
should read it. I wish you do. And it's available on Amazon, and you get it delivered to wherever you are.
Yeah, certainly, yes. I'm going to read it.
And if you let me know, then I'd be happy to sign a copy for you.
Yeah, thank you. It will be a great opportunity. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Now
thank you.
Reena Ghai, she's the managing director of Green Eyes Solutions, which is a solar services and solutions firm. She's an entrepreneur and believes in philanthropy. Yes, Reena.
Good evening. What a pleasure to be able to read the book. And in addition to that, your acumen, your strategy, the hard work, all just shines through the book.
Thank you. Thank you.
But today, and being in business, I believe that you have a lot to contribute even now to entrepreneurs, to not only in the media, but even in the non-media segments, because there's some points that are always common in businesses that you need to do in terms of strategy, in terms of that indefatigable spirit to work that hard, etc. My question today, first I'm going to start with the quote that you say, that you gave the media, which is, this book is a memoir, no more than that. This is not intended to open a can of worms, nor is it a set of kiss and tell stories. Now, with that in context, my question to you are your insights on human nature. Now, in human nature, first, the question has three parts. Part one, did any or many of the career impetus and luminary beneficiaries of the Star TV reach out or connect with you directly or indirectly as a friend or colleague in your times of adversity? That's my question A.
Okay.
Question B is that as a successful person and professional with a repertoire of rich experiences, how would you rank the importance of the following aspects? Number one, relationships, love, professional achievements, networking, and family. And the C part of it is that your future plans. Where do you see yourself coming in? As we do know that icons are made of the work that they have accomplished, and you certainly have done it, and you have not let any hurdles in your life ever stop you from moving forward. So your future plans.
All right. Wow. This is a conversation piece, Rina, which is probably
very brief.
probably worthy of a 1 hour conversation in itself. But thank you for the question. I really appreciate you taking, time to kind of put the question together, because it has so much, meaning in it in a very, very subtle kind of way. Okay, so I have to say that I'm seriously impressed. Number one, I got to tell you, let me start by saying something else. I'll come on to the question. You might have reminded me a little bit. I've made some quick scribbles while you were talking, but if I missed any of those elements of that, you might have to remind me about it when I'm answering. But I got to tell you that, one of the industries that interests me a great deal right now, like media did, 20 years ago, is the business and the industry that you're in, which is of, renewables, solar energy. And I think green is really where it's at for this current generation, for the next, foreseeable future, let's say the next 20 or 30 years, till we've kind of crossed the hump of, overcoming some of the big obstacles. And I think it's a great industry that you're in, and good luck to you. And, I wish you well. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. Look, the book is not a can of worms. It's not intended to open a can of worms, although it has the potential to do so. You have to be reading between the lines. And I said this earlier to somebody that, you have to read between the lines maybe 2-3 times to see what is actually being said, what is, what the narrative is leading to. And if you're a kind of a person that can do that, then there's I think more learning in it than you would imagine. Okay, so, and it's certainly not a kiss and tell, because there really isn't that much to kiss and tell about. So that I haven't written in that. It's all in there, and it's a very honest narration. There's lots of stuff I've left out. Okay, that's quite different to being a kiss and tell or a can of worms. There's a lot of stuff which I haven't written about, and that is something perhaps for another day, for another book, for another moment in life. And at this point, the book is intended to be more of a business book. It's intended to give, I think people an opportunity, the reader an opportunity to, as I say, read between the lines, but also to look at how some of these aspects of what I've written about could be of benefit to them in their kind of corporate existences, in their lives, and how it could benefit them, and how to avoid some of the pitfalls that are also kind of present in everyone's day-to-day lives, right? Now, your first question, did anyone or many people reach out to me in my days of adversity? I am absolutely humbled by the fact that so many, and even, I cannot give you, I can give you numbers, but it would be meaningless, where people reached out to me and connected with me either directly or via my family members and via other people who were, in contact with me. And they were just fantastic. I got to tell you that I think about 2 years ago, I had a open heart surgery. And I have, when I had to do that, I wasn't really aware that I had anything wrong with me. I thought it was fine. But the doctors thought they thought differently. And they said, no, you got to go and have a bypass and all that. So when they did all the tests, they said, I had 3 of them. So it was quite a serious thing. And all my ex-colleagues got together and put together a fund which actually paid for my surgery. And till today, not one of them, I've tried to pay them back, they just won't have it. There's a very simple answer, and they say, no, we did it for you, and that's it. So I said, listen, no, come on, I can't take this as being something which is no, but they just, none of them. And I won't give you names, but there's a long list of names. And that for me was just, I'm forever grateful to them, deeply in gratitude. And, it I think says to me that I must have done something right at some point in my life for that to kind of reflect on me in my times of difficulties. Okay, so that's an answer to your first question. Your second one, you say, if I remember correctly, as a successful blah, 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 how do you rank in importance? Relationship, love, professional achievements, and something else. So I lost the connection for a few seconds.
Networking, and the last one was family.
Okay. Look, I got to say, family has to come number one.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, and by family, I mean, the larger unit of family. I don't just mean brother, sister. Of course, they are, part and parcel of one's flesh and blood and children. But I would say family to me, my work colleagues were my family because I spent so much time. I spent more time, at my workplace than I did at home. So for me, my work colleagues, really were family for me. And they have stood by me, at least the bulk of them have stood by me. Some of them were, a bit kind of worried, bit shy, bit unsure, which is fair enough. But the bulk of them have stood by me through thick and thin and are still great friends. So, we're in touch every day. We're kind of constantly in contact. We know each other, each other's personal lives very intimately. We know what's going on. We know who's well, who's not well, whose parents are well, who's, all of that. So we're really fantastically networked in that sense. Of course, we have a WhatsApp group where we share details and so on, and that continues day in and day out. Sometimes it's a bit dreary, but it is fun. And, we know each other's details. So I would say family is number one. Professional achievements, I would say, is last. Okay, because that is, something that happens. It's a happy byproduct. You don't know what's coming. If you're successful, it's an achievement. If you're not successful, you're a failure, and that's fine. That's just the way it goes. Spain plays Italy. They have a great game of football. Italy wins because they score a goal in the penalty, but both teams have a great time, and somebody's got to lose, right? And so professional achievements is a bit like that. Yeah. I'm talking about World Cup and the game that happened last night or the night before. And not the World Cup, sorry, Euro 2020. I think love is important, as a human being. I think that's probably comes just below family. To me, I think you gotta love what you do. You gotta love your profession. You gotta love yourself. You gotta love the people around you, and it is fundamental. And of course, love can transcend into lots of different aspects of your life. Relationships, yeah, also important. I would say it's number 3, but you have to kind of think about it more deeply than perhaps some people do, and including myself. So I think, you think about your relationships, how you get on with people, but in terms of in terms of hierarchy of importance, I would say it's up there. It's in the top half. So it's family, love, and relationships in that order. And working backwards is professional achievements, and just above that, networking. I can't be more candid than that.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Future plans? I don't know. I'm waiting. I'm waiting for somebody to come, offer me something that, I can't refuse. It's not about money. It's about something exciting.
Yeah.
I've come to realize that money is important, but it's not the be all and end all. I'd be happy to work with somebody who, has virtually no money today, but maybe have an eye to the future where it's going to grow and mushroom into something quite useful and valuable. That's fine. But I think the work or the involvement has to be complete, has to be total, has to be transparent, has to be honest, but has to be fun and exciting. It cannot be something which is, dull and uninteresting. So yeah, future plans, nothing set in stone, but yes, mind is open.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time to answer.
Thank you. And we'll take up only last two questions because I know we are running out of time. And we have Neeta Verma. She's a software engineer by profession and has a technology startup called Yant, providing hardware and embedded solutions for internet things. Yes, Neeta.
Hi, Peter. I've been watching Neeta's author interaction, and this time I jumped on it, and this is my first interaction that I'm attending, and I'm really, really glad to have done that. So I will have a simple question for you. And what I want to ask is, I'm really grateful for Star Plus. That has been my mom's company for the past so many years since my dad left. And so given that, all the youngsters, everybody has moved on to the OTT-based platforms, what do you think is the future for these traditional channels? Where is the competition? Do they have to reinvent, or do they stay for the generation that is not technically so savvy yet?
Well, hi, Neeta. Very nice of you to kind of ask me this very tough question. It's an impossible one to answer, of course, and there's no right and wrong, and there's no kind of level of accuracy in this one. So I'll just go with what I feel and what I think in this, because I think about it quite a lot, because obviously I've been involved in this industry for some time, and for me it's something that I reflect on things that have happened, and I think about things that are likely to happen, but without having a real finger on the pulse on that. But my sense is that, look, I think there's a great future still for traditional broadcasting as it stands today. They obviously have to evolve. They cannot stand still. But in that process of evolution, I think they need to kind of continue to evolve the way they're looking at, their programming. And one of the things that I'm a great advocate of right now is short duration content. So rather than, even the OTT platforms today are, obviously they're attractive, watched by a lot of people. But if you talk to youngsters who are sort of 12, 13 and younger perhaps, and you ask them what are they watching, and they find things like Netflix really boring. Why? Because it's too long. So if you think of a 45-minute episode of whatever program you happen to like, they find that really boring. So they're going through those 45-minute episodes in a fast forward mode. So they're kind of fast forwarding stuff that is, really dull and want to go straight into stuff and get in and get out within 12, 13, 14 minutes, And so I think what traditional broadcasters, who used to be traditional broadcasters, need to do is to revitalize their kind of, their business models by, I would say, re-engineering their schedules and re-engineering them to the extent that they say, instead of having these ghastly 1-hour programs or 3-hour indie movies or whatever it is, we're going to go really short duration, 15 minutes, 12 minutes, and go that way, so that you've got a whole new generation of people looking at it, with a different point of view. What screen they watch it on is immaterial, because that is not conditional right now. So they can watch it on a mobile, which is probably the way they will watch it, or on anything else that's likely to come around the corner. They get it on a 4G or a 5G, or eventually on a 6G delivery system, but it will be short duration, is my view.
That's such a coincidence. The last week, I only watched short stories on Disney Hotstar.
Yeah. Well, that's. I think that's you're at the cusp of the wave.
Twitterization of the channels now.
Yeah.
Short.
Indeed. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Peter.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nam. Thank you.
Time in middle of your daughter's birthday celebrations. Thank you. And now we have Ashish Bhandari. He's a media and communications professional, voice artist, and podcaster. Yes, Ashish.
Hi, Mr. Mukerjea. Hi, Neeta. I won't take much of a time. I just want to share an anecdote, and my question follows that. I was I spent 15, 16 years in news media, having served 3 of the major organizations here. But my incident happened in 2006, where we were getting trained by Ingrid Formanek from CNN Atlanta as field producers. So field production as a concept was pretty new to us, and I was a new producer. So in the middle of the session, one of their representative came, and they were taking feedbacks from the participants, and they asked me if at all this learning was helpful to us. But then the one thing I told them as a gut feeling was that it's pretty nice, pretty fancy the way things are covered on the international networks. But I don't think it works for us, as Indian networks, because a lot of our operations run on the word jugaad, as we say. So they had a pretty good laugh at it. They were surprised also. But then, having spent a lot of years and having been a field producer myself, covering elections and this Anna Hazare Andolan and a lot of interviews, and I thought what I said as a gut feeling in 2006 is actually true. So my question follows this anecdote, and I have written it down as a teleprompter myself. So the broadcast media has seen a sea change in terms of technology in the last 2 decades, in terms of shooting stuff, in terms of producing programs, in terms of equipment. And but then the last year and a half or a couple of years has been even more dynamic. So the question arises is how well do you think our media houses have fared in terms of upskilling their workforce for this sudden change now? And how do we bridge this gap? Because I've seen people who've been doing the same kind of work for a long part of their career. So how do we bridge this gap in upskilling our workforce?
Well, Ashish, thank you. It's a very, very interesting question. I think it's a tough one. And your point is well noted about, jugaad, and there's been a sea change, okay, without any doubt. The question is, from what I could understand, the question is, how have broadcast companies, news channels in particular, adapted, right? I think poorly. A bit like my school report card, which would always say at the end of term, could do better. Mm-hmm. All right. And I think I would say that's the problem. That's my reading of it. And I say that because at the end of the day, what you see on your screen, be it on your phone, on your computer, your tablet, or whatever, or your regular TV set, is what is a reflection of what is going on in that particular broadcaster's day-to-day existence. You can see news. Let me start from what you see. You see news anchors. I think, again, poorly trained, overworked, right? Sets, I'm sorry to say, look, what's a polite word of saying, poor?
Yeah.
Graphics, too much, too heavy, too constant, too, I would say too virile. It's just too much happening. You don't want a screen where there's 10 different things to look at. Our brains are still not conditioned to that. And I think all of those things come together when you switch on, a channel, right? So what do? You either switch off completely, go to an alternative medium, which is cleaner, right? Or you go to another channel, which is perhaps not an Indian one. And I have never been able to understand why that does not change. And my sense is that the way we measure our success or failure of a news business is based on ratings, which I think is the wrong way to go. I think ratings should be only relevant to entertainment and not for news. I think for news, it should be totally qualitative. Twice a year, you should do, a qualitative study on what a set of viewers, different demographics, think about a particular service. Is it biased? Is it unbiased? Is it honest? Is it fake? What's going on? They'll give you a very good insight. And then you compare it to 6 months later. Has the needle moved? Has it changed? Has it not? This business of looking at ratings on a daily basis or on a weekly basis, for a news business is what is actually driving all of this other stuff to go wrong. Because, when you're chasing what I would call chasing ambulances, then that's what you're going to get.
Well, thank you. But then weekly ratings also drive the revenue on all the channels.
Well, that is because they're there. If you remove ratings from the news channels, then revenue will follow a different kind of path.
True. Right?
Revenue will be, the decision on revenue will be based on other factors, right? Is it accurate?
True.
Is it, as I said earlier, is it biased?
True.
What's the level of in-depth reporting?
True.
And I think those are the factors that will come in. And sure, you can't measure those daily, you can't measure those weekly, but you can measure those on a 6-monthly basis, right?
Thank you. Maybe we hope that with the advent of new media, the digital media, the broadcast, the traditional broadcast will follow the norm and improve or evolve.
Well, I hope so. I really hope so, because otherwise I think the future is going to be quite bleak, because over a period of time, viewers are going to turn off and they're going to go somewhere else.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Mukerjea. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ashish. Thanks for that question. Very interesting. Good insight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. And we took so much of your time, but there were such questions. There's still so many questions still. But everyone has to read the book so that they can get their questions answered. And
yeah, please do.
Yeah, and you can always buy it on Amazon. And if you want an author signed book, you can always get in touch with us. We can put you through to Westland and they can arrange a copy for you. And thank you, Peter. Thanking you is not enough. I mean, you've graced our platform and you've really enriched us with so much of the knowledge. I'm sure everyone will be going back home, literally back home. And they have really gained from the session. Thank you.
Thank you. Neeta, thank you very much. I really enjoyed it. Some really, really interesting questions. And thank you for not sharing those questions with me earlier. So I had no chance to prepare for any of them. So, it took me completely by surprise and I had to go completely, as it came. It was spontaneous. So thank you very much. I really, really enjoyed it. Thanks for the opportunity.
And congratulations once again for the beautiful memoir. And
thank you. And please go ahead, tell all your participants to go buy a copy. If not one, at least 5 of them.
And give them also. Yeah.
Yes.
I would like to thank Shweta and Westland for putting us together, for connecting us with Peter. And a big thanks to Rotary Cosmopolitan Faridabad and the Rotary Fraternity. And the link of the video will be up on our channel soon, so you can have a look again. And I'll be circulating the video very, very soon. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much.